Chapter 35. Friday morning arrived with the usual electric hum of anticipation. The queue for the public gallery stretched long, an endless line of spectators desperate to witness the next dramatic turn in the trial. The social media evangelists from the previous day had done their work well, which explained the spike in attendance. Online, emotions had reached a fever pitch, but none of that mattered here. This was the only place where justice would be decided. "Please rise for the Honourable Judge Olam," the clerk called. The courtroom rose as one. Judge Olam entered, his black robes flowing, his face an impenetrable mask of authority. Settling into his seat, he addressed the defence. "We will proceed with the trial. Defence, are you ready to call your next witness?" "Yes, Your Honour. Defence calls Dr. Kenneth Obi." Obi took the stand, swore the oath, then adjusted his glasses before folding his hands neatly in front of him. Emmanuel approached. "Dr. Obi, could you state your full name and profession for the record, please?" "My name is Dr. Kenneth Obi, and I am a psychiatrist specializing in mental health disorders." "Can you tell us about your professional background?" "I studied medicine at Imperial College London before specializing in psychiatry at the University of Oxford. I have been practicing for over 20 years, focusing on patients suffering from PTSD, schizophrenia, and severe trauma-related conditions." Emmanuel nodded. "Thank you, Dr. Obi. Can you share your professional assessment of Rachael Brown?" Obi turned slightly towards the jury to command their full attention. "Of course. After conducting an extensive interview and psychological evaluation, I diagnosed Miss Brown with post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD." The room fell utterly silent. Even the jurors, some of whom had previously worn masks of detached skepticism, leaned forward ever so slightly to listen. Her PTSD stems from a history of severe trauma, beginning in her teenage years and persisting into adulthood. With her permission, I will share these details. Emmanuel gave a reassuring nod. Dr. Obi took a breath and began. As a teenager, Rachael was sexually abused by a trusted family friend. Shortly thereafter, she was deceived into traveling to the UK under false pretenses. The journey itself was marked by abuse and starvation. Upon arrival, she was subjected to further horrific abuse, both physical and sexual. She was trafficked, controlled, and exploited from the moment she set foot in Kent via a small boat. She was threatened constantly that if she ever escaped, they would come after her and her family. 2 women trafficked by the same organized crime network were used as examples. Their remains were pulled from the Thames, and the pimps made them almost impossible to recognize. He paused. "She has physical scars, and they are very grotesque scars. These she got for resisting her captors. For years, she endured unimaginable suffering before being rescued by Women of Mercy, a charity committed to helping trafficked children and women." In the jury box, a middle-aged woman discreetly wiped her eyes. A couple of jurors blinked rapidly, their previous indifferent expressions now deeply troubled. Even some of the men shifted uncomfortably as they absorbed the gravity of what had just been revealed. Emmanuel let the moment breathe before speaking again. "Dr. Obi, can you explain the long-term psychological effects of such trauma?" The psychiatrist nodded. "The long-term effects of prolonged sexual abuse and trafficking are profound," he said calmly. "Survivors frequently develop post-traumatic stress disorder. Common symptoms include hypervigilance, dissociation, an exaggerated startle response, and an impaired ability to accurately assess present danger under stress." He paused, allowing the words to settle. In Miss Brown's case, these symptoms presented as an acute fear of recapture, difficulty distinguishing past threat from present safety, and a tendency to freeze or dissociate during moments of perceived danger. Emmanuel leaned forward slightly. "Dr. Obi, How would such a condition affect someone in a sudden, high-stress confrontation? A person with complex PTSD, Dr. Obi replied, may react instinctively rather than rationally. Their body responds before conscious thought. Behavior in such moments is often fragmented, defensive, and driven by survival mechanisms formed during earlier trauma. "Objection, Your Honor," Gerald Thornton roared. "The witness is crossing into speculation." A ripple of tension passed through the courtroom. Judge Olam's gaze shifted from Dr. Obi to Emmanuel and finally settled on Gerald with the faintest flicker of impatience. "Mr. Thornton," he said, "the witness is entitled to explain the clinical basis for his assessment. He has not asserted a legal conclusion." Gerald's nostrils flared. "Objection overruled." Dr. Obi continued undeterred. "Ms. Brown has learnt to manage her trauma, but not always successfully. It resurfaces unexpectedly. Fear is her greatest struggle, and it is a very real, consuming fear." His voice lowered, more solemn now. "She is haunted by the belief that someone from her past, the men who controlled and profited from her suffering, will return for her. Her medical records confirm this diagnosis." He hesitated before delivering the final, devastating truth. And on the night in question, when Edward tried to surprise her, that fear took over. In her mind, he was not her husband. He was an intruder, a predator, a man sent to hurt her. A long pause. And in that moment of terror, she acted. Silence held the room. She defended herself. Her trauma made her see the ghost of her past rather than the man in front of her. By the time he finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Some jurors were visibly shaken. The gallery murmured. The weight of the testimony settled like a heavy fog. Even Charlotte looked solemn. Her mother, however, remained unmoved, her expression carved from stone. Emmanuel broke the silence. "Thank you," he said warmly. "No further questions for now." Judge Olam turned to the Crown Prosecutor. "Your witness." Gerald rose and approached the stand. His jaw remained still, but the muscle beneath it twitched, a reflection of the tension simmering beneath his composure. "Dr. Obi," Gerald began with controlled calm, "thank you for your testimony." He paced slowly, turning briefly towards the jury before returning his gaze to the witness. "You've stated that Miss Brown suffers from PTSD due to a history of trauma. That's correct, yes?" "Yes," Dr. Obi replied evenly. "That is correct." "And PTSD, as you described, can cause individuals to freeze in moments of extreme stress." "That is one possible response." The prosecutor nodded slowly, his expression sharpening. "Would you say that PTSD completely removes an individual's ability to act rationally in a stressful situation?" Dr. Obi weighed his words carefully. "Not completely, but it can significantly impair decision-making in moments of acute stress." A flicker of satisfaction crossed Gerald's face. "So," he said, stepping closer to the jury, "it's possible that Miss Brown froze when she saw her husband bleeding. I'll give you that." He leaned in slightly, his tone tightening. "But afterwards, after the moment of trauma had passed?" A beat of silence. "Wouldn't choosing not to call 999 suggest something else? Perhaps an attempt to conceal what she had done?" Emmanuel's brow furrowed, sensing the shift. "Objection," he snapped. "Speculation." Judge Olam raised a hand. "Overruled. The witness may answer." Jurors shifted in their seats. Dr. Obi exhaled slowly. "PTSD can impair judgment, but I cannot speak to her exact reasoning after the event." Gerald seized the opening. "So PTSD doesn't absolve her actions afterwards. It doesn't explain failing to seek help while the victim lay bleeding. He turned fully to the jury and drew a steadying breath. I am afraid I cannot speak to her response later. Thank you, Gerald said crisply. No further questions. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Jurors exchanged uneasy glances. Gerald returned to his seat, arms folded loosely and his chin raised slightly. He had the smug look of a man very satisfied with his craft. Rachael's hands trembled in her lap. Gerald Thornton had raised the stakes. Dr. Obi was meant to be their star witness, and she no longer knew how brightly he had shone. I assure you, we tell you what we know and have seen, and yet you won't believe our testimony. John 3:11.